Okay, hello, and welcome to Cohere Thanksgiving Hackathon. I'm so excited to be here, and I hope that you all are. It's really amazing to have everyone from different parts of the world tune in for the same purpose and the same goals and the same interests. And I believe it's going to be an amazing weekend. My name is Mary Abba, and I'm going to be your MC for today, your host. And let's get straight to it then. So at first, I'm going to be reading off, just letting you know about our schedule for this weekend. Starting with this Friday, we're going to have a little introduction, just letting you in on some of the lab and into our mission and vision there. Our two co-founders, Matthias Asberg and Pavel Czech, cannot be here unfortunately. They are attending an event currently. But they wish so much they could be here, but they're going to tune in and watch it. They're really excited for everyone who is here attending it. And we look forward to see how it's going to turn out. Afterwards, we're going to have a little opening talk by a very, very special guest, Kemi Tijani from Cohere. And she's really excited to talk to you, give you a briefing of what's going on. And right after her, we're going to introduce my favorite part, which is the challenge. And I'm looking forward to it. I hope that you all are. We're also going to tell you some more about the Discord and LabLab platform, just so you can familiarize yourself with it and know the different plans that you can do on there. And then, obviously, after you've done your entire project, you need to present it properly. So we're going to show you how to prepare a very good presentation. We'll tell you how to the guidelines to use for it, and also in something that you need, most people are here for, is your team. So we're going to have a section for you to have make a team formation. You can join different groups and find people on the LabLab Discord channel. And after that, we have a sandbox workshop with Eddie Kim, who is excited to be here also, which is what we have, and that's what we have scheduled for today, Friday. And starting off tomorrow on Saturday, we're going to start with just to get your juices flowing and to get everyone relaxed and start really energetic. We're going to have a 15-minute yoga break or opening by one of our colleagues, also Anastasia, who is also excited to be here. And after her, we will have interviews by you, the participants, because we always love to know what you think about it, because obviously we do this for you. So the feedback is always welcome, and we would love to see how you plan on moving forward with this direction. And then we have a workshop by Christina Stefan, who is going to be spilling the tea with a recruiter. And I know that we have so much big plans, but the thing is, as much as you want to go in life, eventually you need to get your foot in the door in some of these big spaces. And one of the processes you're going to go through is recruitment stage. So that's going to be really helpful, and I'm looking forward to it too. And on Sunday is the final time, and we're looking forward to your submissions. And I cannot wait to see what you have. I'm really excited. I hope that you can go as far as you want, because you are the builders and innovative builders, and we look forward to see how you the different directions in which you can take it. So that's basically the schedule for this entire weekend. And now I'm just going to be giving you a brief introduction of what we are and what we do. As you can see here, I'm starting with LabLab. So LabLab is an AI is an initiative. Sorry, I can't say designed to support and simulate the modern artificial intelligence ecosystems and the innovators behind it. So basically, we have like a system to encourage and support people. We have different collaborations with different infrastructure, which we put on this initiative and on the system, so people can actually come and find it and use it. And then we have New Native, which we believe that AI can assist humankind in solving existential challenges. And we also offer one of the largest wealth creation opportunities for early adopters for this century. New Native also gathers humans by rebuilding different infrastructures and different tools, which is a common goal of everyone who is here, I think, to help you define your community and also bring the builders, bring the innovators, bring the investors all together on one and meet yourselves. And Cohere, which I will not be talking about here because we have our special guest from Cohere directly. So I'm going to let Miss Kemi go on and talk about Cohere. And I really do hope that you all are as excited as I am to be here. Our co-founders just sent in a message that they are rooting for you, and we really do hope that you enjoy this as much as we are looking forward to it. So, without much further ado, I'm going to bring up Kemi Tijani. Kemi, you here? Thank you.
Hi, Maya. Thanks so much for the intro. Can you hear me okay? Amazing. Thank you so much for the intro. And I'm really excited to be here today. A little bit about me. So I look after, actually, one. Okay, yeah. A little bit about me. Can you guys see my next slide? I'm not sure. Okay, amazing. I look after partnerships here at Cohere, but I've been in the tech industry for over 15 years now. It seems like a really long time. But I've kind of seen tech evolve through different kinds of phases from, early days for me, where everything was on-prem and, businesses were hosting their own servers and folks were, building in some outdated languages, to going through the whole cloud revolution, where businesses started to move to the cloud and obviously you start to take advantage of new capabilities, which has led to innovation in artificial intelligence because now you can just leverage some of those infrastructure capabilities in the cloud to actually power your applications or your solutions wherever they are. So I'm a little bit of a veteran in this space, but today I wanted to talk to you guys about kind of the opportunity with AI. And I'm sure we all see it kind of all over. If you're on social media, for instance, on Instagram, you can take a really basic picture of yourself and sort of jazz it up and make it look stunning. And that's one application of AI. Another is, if you watch Netflix or any of the streaming platforms where they're looking at your behavior and your previous sort of viewing history and trying to predict what your preferences are going to be. And then the third example I wanted to share is with Google, who's actually a huge partner to Cohere, where you start to type out your search query and it already starts to recommend options to you, again, based on what it knows about you, your location, your history. And the goal there is to give you relevant information as quickly as possible. Now, the one thing all these examples have in common is that they're all massive tech companies, right? Like for most developers, you say to yourself, well, I see that Facebook is doing that on Instagram or, Netflix is doing it on their platform and Google, but these are massive companies. And so how do I use these capabilities without being in one of these companies? And that's exactly what we're here to make possible at Cohere. So first, I wanted to define NLP because we do use the term, all over in our marketing collateral, and it was on my first slide where I said, we want to teach you how to build the next generation of apps with NLP. But NLP in itself means natural language processing. It's a subfield of AI, and it's primarily concerned with processing and understanding of human language by machines. So think of it as giving a computer or a machine the ability to understand what people say, what they mean, and use that insights to give them more efficient or more useful experiences with machines or with applications, right? And there's some areas already where you start to see AI in action. I know I shared the more sort of consumer-focused use cases, but in a business context, like if any of you uses Gmail, you probably experienced a situation where you're typing out an email and it's auto-completing the sentence or trying to predict what you want to say. You see it in voice assistants when you call customer support and you're getting some AI-enabled bot as your first point of contact. chatbots as well, and then also with basic translations where you can get a text from in any language and then get it translated to another language, just by calling on an API essentially. Now, I'm sure from those who are not very familiar with NLP, the question usually comes up and like, why does this matter? Like, why should I care about this? So machines can understand language. What's the big deal? The big deal is that today, 80% of the world's data is unstructured, and it's captured in text in some database or some data store. And we don't have a great way to actually get insights from unstructured data, because you can think of this as your emails or your call transcripts or chat transcripts, all the communication you've ever made in your entire life. That's a lot of that's probably sitting as unstructured data in different data stores, and today there's just not much insights or value being derived out of that. When you think about organizations, they even have more data. They have transactional data with each customer. They have reviews, feedback. They have product descriptions and service descriptions. They have all kinds of data that's not structured, that getting insights from would be super beneficial. And so if 80% of the world's data is unstructured and we're not really able to leverage that data today, that means everything we see around us is actually built off of 20% of the data. And I mean, those numbers really excite me, because I'm like, if everything I experience today is just 20%, what is possible if we unlock the rest of it, right? And so that's why NLP is a big deal, because it gives us a way to make sense of that data that we've not been able to leverage in the past. Now, switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about Cohere and, about how you would typically work with building NLP into a product, and then how we would make that much easier and much more accessible for developers. So today, if you work in an organization, and you have to be in an organization because as a developer or a student or someone who's just starting out, you're not going to have access to these resources. And most organizations, to be honest, don't have access to it because it's really expensive to invest in building out the infrastructure and the team, and then kind of the modeling process as well. But typically what an organization would need to do is, in order to I'm gonna use an example application here. So let's say you're trying to build an application that sends a custom Thanksgiving message to every single customer. You don't want something generic. You want it to be personalized. You want it to be based on, something they've told you about themselves. And so maybe you have a field in a form and that would be, say, step one, where there's a form field where people tell you about themselves. And this is where the data comes in. And then you have step two, where you basically want to use that to customize, generate a Thanksgiving message. And so you take that form and you put it in a data store, but then you now want to send out that information to be sort of processed and get a custom generation per customer. Like if you wanted to do that today in step three, first, you're going to need to collect a ton of data about, Thanksgiving messages, right? And customer descriptions of themselves. And then you're going to need to somehow label that data and say, well, for customers who describe themselves as this would be an amazing Thanksgiving message for that person. And then step two is you're going to need software to train your models. You're going to need inferencing software. You're going to need a way to evaluate the model that you're building, because you have to build a custom model. And then you're going to start to think about compute, storage. You're going to need a full-time team of machine learning engineers and probably ops engineers and just everyone who's going to keep this model running and updated. You're going to think about safety and trust. You don't want your model to kind of write out stuff that offends people. You think about maintenance. if you want to keep your application up to date, you're going to keep innovating and trying to make better Thanksgiving messages than your competitors. And then, yeah, I already talked about the data labeling. And so these are all the tasks that you're going to have to figure out because you just want to wish people a custom, you want to send people a custom Thanksgiving message. And it just seems like too much effort, right? And so you don't see this happening very often because for many applications, it's just not worth the investment to go build out all of this. Now, switching gears, I'm just showing what it would take to build the same application with Cohere. So think of it as us having built out everything in this sort of bottom section here, like from data collection to labeling to training to maintenance, R&D, like we've done that. So that you just, build your form, capture the information, store it in your database or warehouse, and then write an API call to Cohere with that information, and receive a custom message for each customer. Like all you need to do is call on an API, and so you can get this built and get this started like way faster. And so for individuals or for small or mid-sized companies that cannot make this investment by themselves, or where it doesn't even make sense to do that, this makes it possible for you to actually start to leverage NLP within your own applications. I would argue that even for large enterprises, like where, again, they might have the resources, but if it's not your core business to build and manage models, just the way you host your data in the cloud, or you host some applications in the cloud because it makes sense to do that, it might also just make financial sense or like business sense to use a large language model like Cohere's offering. And then I just wanted to give an example of, a lot of our customers or our users are building products that actually use our models in more than one task. And that's really easy to do. Again, you might have wanted to generate a custom Thanksgiving message. And that's, pretty much a generic task. Like generating a Thanksgiving message doesn't seem highly specialized. And so you can just send that to our baseline models. Now, let's say further along the line, you decided, well, I don't want to just do this for Thanksgiving. I want to build out a whole thing that generates, every time there's a holiday, I want a new message sent out. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my company and my brand. And I wanted to sound like my company because we have a really good marketing positioning. Well, if you wanted to do that later on, again, it would still be an API call, but this time you will be first looking to create your own custom models, which again, super easy to do with Cohere. And so you would bring some of that data about your company or about your, the entities that you want recognized. Give us a few examples of what that brand voice sounds like. And then we can train a custom model so that when you want to call on that, for your future tasks, you just call on that specific model, and whatever data you share or you use for that training is kind of only accessible within your domain. So like within your business or your teammates, if you give them permissions to do that, we don't share that with other customers. So you're not sort of contributing to a pool that you don't have control over. It's fully within your control who gets access to your data. All right. So I wanted to give a few examples, seeing as this is a hackathon and it's competitive, and I wish everyone would win, but we can't all be winners every single day. I wanted to give you guys a few tips, just in terms of how to think about building, whatever ideas you have or you're working on. So this is an example of a flow of, this is actually something that a few of my colleagues built during our internal hackathon week, where we wanted to try to create a factual and contextual Q&A. We called it Ask Jeeves 2.0. For those of you who know what Ask Jeeves is, it's a search engine from I think the early 2000s where you could type a question to Jeeves, who's this virtual butler type personality, and just say to Jeeves like, who was the Queen of England in 1800, right? And Jeeves would go search that and respond with just the name. And so we were trying to replicate that with Cohere. And so what we did was, well, step one is that you take in the question. So this would be, who was the Queen of England in 1800? And then we decided to do two things. First, on the I'll take you to the top flow and then I'll come back to the bottom, what's happening there. But first, we sent it to our generate endpoint, which generates text. And we wanted it to convert whatever a user entered into a contextualized question. So sometimes users are not direct in terms of how they ask questions. Sometimes they would say, in 1800, there was a Queen of England. Who do you think she was? Like, that's a question. And it would be exactly the same as who was the Queen of England in 1800. For those of us who use search engines, you know that the sort of more wordy option will probably not get you the best results. Like the more sort of surgical you are around typing in your search query, the better results you get. And so what we're doing here is telling our generate endpoint, like whatever a user sends in, no matter how like verbose or like ambiguous it is from like a meaning perspective, try to convert that into a question that's like simple to send to a search engine. So that's what's happening here. You get a contextualized question. And then we take that contextualized question and send it to the search API. So this could be any search API. And then it generates, a bunch of web results. So again, think about if you're searching on Google, you get a bunch of links. But then we actually go into those links and grab the top 3 pages from the results that we shared. And then we kind of queue those here for a similarity comparison. Again, this is another call to a Cohere model, which is doing similarity comparison. Now, I'll pause here to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on in the bottom flow. So while all of that was happening, we also sent another call to generate. And this time, we were trying to create a template for an answer. So think about, if you were having a conversation that sounded natural and you asked the person, hey, who was the Queen of England in 1800? They would respond with something like Queen Victoria. I'm not sure if that's factually accurate, but let's just go with it. So they would say, oh, Queen Victoria was the queen in 1800, right? And that's what the answer should sound like. And so we're using this other call to figure out what should the answer sound like. And once we have that, we compare that answer to what we grabbed from the web pages. Now, the thing about the generate model is that it's really great at generating language that sounds correct, but it's not really factual, right? So sometimes it's lucky and it guesses right, but a lot of the time it's just guessing, right? So it's not accurate. And so that's the whole point of this example, which is to create something that was factual and also sounded natural. And so we take that natural sounding answer and we compare it with the 3 facts that we grabbed, and that's what's happening in this similarity stage. We pull out the most relevant answers or paragraphs that have the right answer, and that would be paragraphs that are most similar to what was generated here. And then we make one last call to our generate model. And what we're saying here is, what we were doing here was saying, well, respond to the user in this tone of voice. And so this could be, respond to the user as a pirate or respond to the user as a clown or whatever. You can use any examples and just give it some examples of what personality you want. And then it would give you the final answer in that personality. And it will be a factual and accurate response to the question that was asked in the tone of voice that you want it to be. So this is a bit of a complex example, but I wanted to share it because I wanted to share the thinking around how do you build out that flow if you're trying to figure out, well, you have an idea for a hackathon project and this is your first time working with our models or LLMs. You might want to kind of plot this out and figure out, well, what's going to happen at each stage. How many calls are you going to need to make? And then does it make sense before you actually go out and start building? I have a couple more examples, and I think I might be almost at time, so I'll try to go through these quickly. This one is a Magic the Gathering card generator, again, developed by Nick, who's one of our co-founders at Cohere. It's a really simple one because it just has 2 steps, right? So for those of you that are Magic fans, unfortunately, never played it, but I've heard great things. This is a generator that basically takes in a description of a card and then generates, well, it takes in a character name and then generates a description and then takes that description and generates an image. Now, this image generation is a call to another API, not Cohere's at this point, although we're kind of playing around in this space these days. But yeah, you can send it to any text to image API and then get an image that describes that kind of is a visualization of the description. And so the output here is you have a card that's winged egg. That was the input. You have an image of an egg with wings that looks super spooky, and I think that's the whole point with Magic. And then you also have like a description. It's a little too small to read, but it's in like this sort of strange mythical language that Magic the Gathering uses for their cards. So this is a super simple one. For those of you who are thinking about Thanksgiving cards, I might have just given you the sort of cheat sheet for that. And then the last one is a recommendation system. Again, a bit more complex, but what's happening here is it takes inputs of what you're currently reading. It tries to understand, like, what are the themes within that. So it's doing a similarity sort of scoring within your history, and it's coming up with like categories that you are interested in, and then it's taking that information and like searching for other similar articles that have the same kind of semantic meaning or that are semantically similar. It classifies them, determines if they're in the same category, extracts the names of those articles, and then it recommends them to you. So again, cheat sheet if you're looking to build a recommendation system. And that was my very last slide. I just wanted to say good luck with the hackathon. I think it's going to be super fun. Can't wait to see what you build. Anyone wants to reach out to me for any reasons, if you're like a business user or you're from a company that's interested in learning more, feel free to send me an email. If you're just a dev and you just want to connect, I'm always happy to chat with people. And you can get all the information you need about our models on our website. If you haven't already been there, it's cohere.ai or cohere.com. And good luck.
All right, thank you so much, Kemi. It's been lovely having you.
Sure.
Interesting with you. All right, so if you want to get in touch with Kemi, you can always reach out to her here. Just giving us her contact details. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the next agenda on the program. One second. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about the challenge and what you're going to do today. So basically, the theme for today is Thanksgiving Cohere Hackathon. So you need the challenge for this hackathon is to create an innovative solution using the Cohere API. So we challenge you to create now. Obviously, with the theme, we're very thankful for this platform, the tools, all being here. So the challenge is to create something that can be useful to others, that can benefit others around you. And remember that you can get additional points if your project uses Cohere generate endpoints. So to get started, first of all, you have to sign up, and the website you can see there, which is cohere.ai, and sign up. And after that, you can find tutorials and boilerplate on our Lab Tech page. So that's also a very helpful tool for you to check on, and also on our Lab Discord. And so now, just quickly, I'm not going to say much about Sandbox because we have a very special guest here, Eddie Kim, who's going to come back and talk more about it. But just a summary, Sandbox is Cohere's new project, and basically it's a tool that helps you with application building and how to present it and whatnot. But we have more. We'll hear more about it from Eddie Kim later on. So now we're going to go on the technology that we have to use. So instead of going and buying your own websites and building it, and then when we send it, it's a problem for us to read it. We have Streamlit and Replit available to use. So we recommend it for you. You can use it easily. This is what we've been using in the previous hackathons. And now this is just a guide for how the process is going to go in terms of creating your teams and your projects. So at first, you start by creating your team. For challenge, sorry? Oh, okay, so telling you more about the challenge, I'm going to bring up Sandra, who is here at one of our events. So Sandra, could you please come up here and tell us more about the challenge and what's going to go on around it?
Sure, happy to. Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you so much for the invite. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra. I'm looking after Cohere's community. And I just wanted to give you a few words of inspiration, I guess, when it comes to our challenge. We are so excited to bring you this year a challenge that encourages you to build something that will benefit others around you. For those of you who has just celebrated or are about to celebrate Thanksgiving or are simply inspired by its spirit, we really want you to take a moment and reflect on your 2022 year and think about what you are thankful for. So when you're working together as a team, just think about your story. Maybe you've met some amazing mentors that helped you throughout the year. Maybe you're passionate about a special cause. Maybe you have an idea that will improve a community that you think might need that. All of these are just a suggestion, but please make sure to feel inspired by the spirit of Thanksgiving, and make sure that your creativity is limitless. And yeah, we want to help you to give back together. In terms of tech focus, we'd love you to think of the most creative, innovative ways to use our API. So just please take a look at the endpoints that Kemi has discussed in depth before me, and think of ways in which you could use them to fuel your projects. And yeah, we have tons of great resources, both in terms of lab tutorials, but also we have just released the sandbox. So this is a collection of experimental open source GitHub repos that you may consider building with. Go and check them out. They might or may not fit within your project, but they might be also a good inspiration for you. We will also be having a mentors and a Discord channel available for you. And yeah, I guess that's all. Good luck, have fun, smash it. And I hope it's going to be an awesome experience for you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra, for that insightful review. And so I guess you all have like the understanding of the important tools that you have in building your or going on with your challenge. Okay, so so this is a hackathon guide on the basically the steps that you're going to take in the process. At first, so first you go on LabLab and you join a team on LabLab, or you can create your own team on LabLab. There is an option there for you. You can create one, or you can join one that's already there. And then on LabLab, there's an option for you to connect your Discord to LabLab, and then you go on Discord and you meet with your team. You discuss with your team and you come up with two or three concepts or one that you feel very strongly about or more. And then after you've come up with your concepts, and then you communicate with your mentors. When your mentors give you the okay or the go ahead to go out to do it, then you build your prototype. And after building your prototype, then you present your solutions, and we'll see how that turns out. So that's pretty much the summary of everything that you're going to do in this weekend. Um, yeah, we're just talking further, and it's on details on where you find this thing. So if you go on the Lab server now, you will see an option to join teams or to create one. And you can also, after that, you connect your Discord to your Lab so you can meet with those teams that you've joined. And then you discuss and you create your concept, talk about it with them. Then you connect with your mentors. The mentors will show you how to go, or give you the go ahead, or they can give you a couple of tips here to adjust and whatnot. And when you have your final idea, then you can go ahead and create your prototype, as I said already. And so now we're going to be talking about your presentation and what to do, because obviously there's tips and tricks here and there, and the criteria required for them. So for your presentation, to communicate with your mentors. The mentors are available throughout the entirety of the event. You can use the calling for help on the team page, and you can wait for your team's voice channel, and they will join you whenever they are available. But during the entire time, they're here. So on to creating your presentation. Every concept, of course, needs outstanding presentation. So here are the core things we recommend you to include. First of all, you obviously have to include what you have already built, and the demo for the prototype, and the process of building the prototype, and of course the business plan, which is also good to have because everything else might just be wishful thinking without it. And then you go into presenting it. You upload your video through the submissions form in Lab page, and your video should not be more than 5 minutes. And that's pretty much it. And now for the evaluation criteria and how it's going to be judged and whatnot, we're going to include, we're going to take into consideration the degree of completion, the presentation style, applicability or the business value, the degree of innovation or originality, of course, the technology and the realistic capability, and the overall impression. So those are the main things that we're going to be looking out for when we are going through your presentation. And now the best part, or not, I think the best part is the creation, but that's your business. All right, so if some of the prizes we have here for 3 winners that we're going to have, first we're going to have $5,000 worth of API credits plus $1,000 in cash. That's for the first place, and then the second place is 3,000 credits and $800 in cash, and the third place gets 1,000 credits and $500 in cash. Additionally, all winning teams, all of them, will get the Cohere swag and have the chance to meet the Cohere founder for virtual coffee and record a video of their demo that will be promoted on Cohere's channels. If you do need additional help, you can always reach out for help on the Lab Discord channel. You can see hashtag Cohere Thanksgiving AI Hackathon channel, or you can also see that use the hashtag I Need Help channel. Or you can also DM our very personal one of our events help is Nasty Anastasia, which is on Discord as Nasty Lab. So I don't know if we'll be going on to this right now, but we still have some time. But for the sandbox workshop, we have Eddie Kim, who is already here and who's going to be talking more about sandbox, as I said earlier, in 40 minutes then. So we can take a quick break and come back in about 30 and 40 minutes at 7:20, I think. And so good luck in your projects. I hope you really enjoy it. So we encourage you to be as innovative and creative as you want and go as broad as you want. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I wish you the best of luck. Have a lovely day. Bye. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back from our little break. I hope you're a lot more refreshed. So far we've had our introduction into New Native and Lab. We've also had an opening speech on Cohere by Kemi. And we've had direction on the challenge by Sandra. And now, last but not least, we have Eddie Kim, who's going to give us a sandbox workshop. And it's titled Using Cohere's Open Conversant Library to Build Conversational AI Agents with LLMs. So, Eddie, it's lovely to have you here. Can you come on now?
Hello, thank you. Okay, let me just figure out my camera here. Think I got it right. Okay, nice. Cool. Thank you for the lovely intro, and thanks everyone for being here. Super excited to talk about the Sandbox open source library and of course the Conversant framework within that. Let me just get my screen share working as well. See here. I think I got this. 1080p, 30 FPS. Go live. All right. I believe that's working now, right? Okay, cool. Nice. Cool. Okay, so I'll start on this and then kind of walk through a few of these different tabs. So we recently at Cohere released a collection of libraries, open source libraries under this sandbox sort of branding. This is our blog post about it, so I won't go through the whole thing, and we'll post a link after. And what I'll be talking about today and going through in this workshop is one of the libraries that my team has worked on called Conversant. And roughly speaking, what this library does, so it's a Python library that you can just pip install, and roughly what it does, this gives you a lot of framework and tooling to allow you to work with conversational agents. You could think of these, like chatbots, but they're powered by Cohere's large language models. And so that gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more open-endedness, and it lets you get up and running a lot faster than some other methods where you might have to do a lot more manual tinkering to get something very quickly. So in this workshop, I'll give you a little demo of how that works, how to import it into your own code, how to modify it. But I will first start with just showing you how it works with a little demo. So I think if this works, so you can see the other screen now, I think, right? Okay, cool. So what you're seeing now is a Streamlit app. So it's just conversant.streamlit.app. And again, all these links we'll post later as well. And when you load this up, so actually let me just refresh it. So when you load this up, you'll just get this little pane that tells you a bit about what library it's using. You get a little link to sign up for Cohere if you want to try building this yourself and getting an API key. But you'll see this drop down on the left, and you get these different personas, we call them. And I'll just load one up to show you what happens before we get into any of the details. So it's a bit of loading. Okay, cool. And then we get all this stuff that it renders on the screen. So we won't worry about the left pane for now. We'll just look at this actual chat. So with this little like cute emoji of a wizard or something that looks like a wizard, and this wizard says, "Good day to thee, fair adventurer. Whither doth thou wander?" Yeah, all right. So I'll just say, I came to your village to learn magic spells. Can you teach me? And so when I hit enter, this will ultimately route a command to a large language model that will generate some text. And let's see what it said. Let's see, you're already on the right path. Magic is the summoning grand elements, but first you must learn the base of summoning. Okay, cool, great. So some conversation that we're having that feels, relatively immersive and conversational, but open-ended, and I could have said whatever. And we get a reply that's sort of in character. And contextual as well, right? I asked about magic spells, and we get some comment on magic spells. So this is one example, and I will show you one more before going to, kind of the explanation of what this framework is doing and why you might want to use it, and how it might be helpful for a hackathon project. Okay, so here we go, another persona that I guess looks like a watch, but is meant to be a watch salesperson. So it's not like the watch is talking to us, although that would be kind of awesome. So thank you for visiting our store. Can I help you find your watches today? Yeah, I need a dress watch for an event. That'll take a little bit of time for the API call. Okay, cool. And it tells us, starts to ask more specifics about what we want. Yeah, how you feel about Rolexes. Okay, so while that happens, I'll now start talking about let's sort of break down and understand what we saw here and what's going on under the hood. So the first thing I'll say is that the language model that's powering both of these scenarios I just showed, the wizard and then the watch, they're actually the same language model. Like there's no fine tuning difference between them. What is different is the prompt to the language model. So I will take a step back and say, if you are not familiar with like large language model usage or lingo, totally okay. A big part of what this framework is meant to do is to abstract that away, so you don't have to worry about that part. So what happens is that under the hood, there's what's called a prompt, which is long string basically, and it's fed to the language model. So this is sort of the context of, here's a series of chats between a watch sales agent and a user. We have some description of what the watch sales agent is and says. We have an example conversation that's sort of like, you can think of this as like a hard-coded example conversation of like how we want this agent to talk. And then we have the live conversation below. And so you can see this is like what I've actually said. And at this very end, we inject whatever message we capture in the input, and then we generate whatever the bot should say after that. But this is all just like a free-form string. You can put anything here, and if you make different choices, you can get sometimes some strange results from language models if you make a strange prompt. And so what this framework does is it manages a lot of that for you, right? If you think about this as you're kind of making a repeated call to a text generation API, and that's part of what Cohere provides. But you have to manage state, right? You have to manage the context or the history of the chat. You have to manage the construction and weaving of this prompt that you feed into the generate command or the text generation command. And so what the Conversing framework does is it lets you use these sort of JSON structured objects to manage a lot of that for you and to prevent any kind of like little differences in the string kind of causing strange behavior. So in a nutshell, then, all these different personas, like the watch sales is like a fortune teller, the wizard, anything that you might want for that could be useful for whatever hackathon project you're building, all you really have to change is this JSON, and you can get some pretty interesting results out of that. So I will leave it at that for the demo. If you want to try, like for the Streamlit demo part, if you want to try it yourself, the URL is pretty short. You can just go here and load it up, and then it should work. And you can try different, let's see here, there's like if you want to edit it live, you can do that too, and you can like actually change the values of some of these things. There's other personas that didn't show, so feel free to play around with it, and it will give you a feel of how open-ended is it really to work with these different language models, which different ways can you take the conversation, so please feel free to try that. There is also a YouTube video that we'll post a link to after, so I won't go to it. But it covers a lot of what I just showed as well, and how to sort of edit this library and make it work for yourself as well. So if there's anything that goes by a little bit too quick in this workshop, yeah, you can just watch that video, and it's really good to step through as a recap. Okay, so that brings us to how do we actually use this, right? So we've seen what this can do, and if you're thinking, okay, I want to work with some kind of conversational chatbot or conversational agent in my hackathon project, like this demo is cool, but what I'm showing here, of course, is like a front end on top of the actual functionality and the actual framework. You want to use it yourself. So you can, of course, go to GitHub. So it's all open sourced. And it's and we're actually like developing this actively in the open as well. You can see there's like active branches. There's open issues. So I will say that if you work with this library and you find any bugs, or if you have any feature requests, feel free to file an issue. We're happy to take a look at those. And of course, the next part's really important because we are live streaming this. And so in true live streamer fashion, I will say the next part, if you smash that star button, super important. Not actually, but if you want to, go for it. But anyway, if you want to use this GitHub repo, there are a couple different things you could do, right? You could fork the repo, then you have your own copy of it. You can modify it however you like. It has a pretty extensive README as well. So if you want to like really dig into how to do all the different kinds of things with this, it's like yeah, I won't go through it because I'm streaming, right? But there's a bunch of stuff in the README. There's a contributors guide as well if you want to extend any of the functionality. So yeah, feel free to do that. So one pathway to use this would be to clone this repo or fork it, I guess, and then use it that way. And I would say I would recommend that route if you want to do like a lot of customization on it and you actually want to change the behavior of it or add features to it. Of course, this is a Python library, and so since it's open source, we've also put it on the Python package index. And so you can see here that it is pypy.org/project/conversant. And so we just released this, was it like 3 days ago or something, the latest version. So if you pip install conversant, you should be able to just install it that way. And so that's probably the more straightforward way. If you want to use this as a library and as a framework where you just want to get up and running quickly, make some modifications, but not like really change stuff under the hood, I would recommend this pathway. So this will give you enough flexibility to make your own conversational personas and interact with them and sort of hook into Cohere's language models without having to dig around at all the language model, like parameters. Yeah, so I would recommend this as a good starting point. Cool. Okay. So I think with that, we can flip over to screen sharing VS Code, and I can show you some like actual demos of how to use this library. And to do that, I need to remember how to switch shares in Discord. So let me figure that out here. So I want to go to VS Code, and then I think I hit the share button again. Let's see here, change windows. Yeah, nailed it. Okay, cool. So 1080p, 30 FPS. All right, cool.
Okay, it's showing, Eddie.
Showing? Okay, cool. Thank you. And hopefully this text is not too small. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay. So you might ask, so let me quickly recap where like what we have just done, because I now like switched screen shares. So just to maintain the context, we talked about the sandbox and that open source release of many libraries. Conversant is one of those. We do have a live stream lit up if you just want to play with it to get a feel for like if it could be useful for your project. Then we talked about you could actually get and use Conversant on GitHub or on PyPy. And now we're flipping over to, this is like literally just VS Code running on my laptop. I spun up a temporary virtual environment in Python, and you can see that. So this is just the terminal at the bottom of the VS Code screen. If I pip freeze and grep for Conversant. Okay, yeah, and I've like pre-installed it because I didn't want to install live. So yeah, so this is installed on this virtual environment. And you can see that using it's pretty straightforward. So let's say in this demo, we just want to work with one of the predefined personalities or personas. It's really just a few lines of code, right? So we import Cohere because we're going to need our client with our API key that you can store in many ways. I mean, environment variables are recommended because you don't want to leak your API key in the code. So I'm just putting an environment variable here. And so we need the Cohere library for that to give us access to the underlying language models. And then we need Conversant. And so there are a few different abstractions that Conversant provides, but one of the like highest level ones is this idea of a chatbot that uses large language model prompts. And so we call it a prompt chatbot. We're really great at naming things, right? It's very literal. So a prompt chatbot, and we can instantiate it or initialize it from a persona. So in this case, because it's a preset persona, it is a preset persona, but if you want, let's say we want to customize it, right? So what you can do is I've actually made locally here a personas folder. I call it Fantasy Wizard, and there's a config.json in here. I go to that. I literally copy pasted this from the one that we have on the Streamlit, so in GitHub. But you can see now under the hood, you can see a lot of like how is this all put together, right? So there's a config for the chatbot. How many lines of context does it remember? What is its emoji avatar? And here, if you've ever worked with any large language model like generation parameters, you can see that's all kind of packaged under the hood here, right? So there's the size of the model, how many max tokens you generate, temperature. So I would say this is one of those things where, like, if you're familiar with this, feel free to tinker with it, and if you're not, like, you shouldn't need to touch it. You can just leave it as it is, and it should just work. And then the chat prompt config is where you actually change the description of what's going on, right? Like, what kind of personality is it? How does it talk? You can give it examples of conversations that will sort of be remembered. Cool. So that's what we're doing here, right? We make a bot, make a fantasy wizard, we pass it the Cohere client, we point it to our local directory so it knows, like, where does it find the JSON file. And in this case, the bot has a nice reply function that's very high level. So reply, it takes in a string and then it gives you back a string, right? So you can imagine that you call this in a loop where you pull for user input and you can expose that to whatever front end you want, right? Whether it's like command line or whether it's just a web app or whatever, you can do whatever you choose. So if I try this, Python, what did I call this? Workshop demo. I used to just tab up, please, right? .py. And so I run it, it should, right? Should take a few seconds and then it should generate a reply. Yeah. Cool. I can teach thee, but only if thou art truly worthy, because I asked, hello, can you teach me a magic spell? Makes sense. Nice. Okay. So that's workshop demo 1. I know I'm like screen sharing code here, and it's useful when you can actually see it in text. And so after this, we will share a link to a GitHub gist that has like this code here that you can copy, paste, modify, all that stuff. Cool. So that's one demo of, again, recapping using this conversion library, and you can see that in like basically 2 function calls slash a few lines. You can get to a chatbot that has a defined personality where you configure everything in a JSON file, and then you can just hit reply over and over again and like continue a conversation. And the bot manages all the stuff like the calls to the language model, manages the chat history, all that stuff. Like, it's just kind of the boilerplate of managing a chat is done for you. Okay, then we have one more workshop demo. So what if you want to do a little bit in line, or just try another example of like how you can customize this, right? If you didn't want to use an external JSON file, you could import, again, a prompt chatbot. You could also import a chat prompt. So this is like the managed JSON-like or dictionary structure, I guess, that has some validation built into it, but it will ultimately stitch together that very long string prompt that gets fed into the language model. So in this case, we make a Cohere client again. We make a config. And so you can see this config isn't too big, right? Like, it doesn't have all the language model parameters and all that, like, the X large and temperature or whatever. It just has the stuff about the bot and how it should chat. It is actually like one of the sub dictionaries in this config.json. And you can also instantiate a chatbot using just this part. And for all of the other configurations, like the language model stuff, it'll just pick like sensible defaults. So in this case, after you've defined this, you can put this into a JSON file if you wanted, and here it's just a Python variable. You can now make another prompt chatbot where the prompt is a parameter you can set, where it's chatbot from dictionary, and then we pass in the dictionary. And so if I run this, it should give you, okay, so if anyone here, I guess this isn't necessarily how Shakespeare talks, but it's close enough. Okay, that's actually really funny. I have not seen that response before. If you have an English literature cell, let me know. That's hilarious. Okay, cool. So that is pretty much the demo. So again, recapping, there's a Streamlit. You should play around with that. Then I'd recommend install the pip library and then just try it out. You can work from these examples and just copy paste them and modify them to however you like. And then the kind of key command to remember is basically the reply command, because that is like what you would call many times to continue a conversation. And if you really want to go under the hood, you could like fork the GitHub repo and then like start changing things around. And if you make anything really cool, you can contribute back with a PR to the original repo. Then you can brag to all your friends that you improved the Cohere conversion framework, which is like super cool street cred. Okay, cool. I think that is pretty much it. And then I think we can do Q&A now. Is that right? Well, now.
Yes, everyone in the chat, please, if you have any questions to Eddie, please write them down. We'll wait a couple of minutes. If any questions come out, we'll read them to Eddie live here. And of course, if anyone has questions later, they can ask you later, right, Eddie?
Yeah, sure. Should I be looking at one of the Discord channels for questions, or are they coming in consolidated through
Okay,
Yukuba?
we have one question. How many
Mm-hmm.
lines of conversation can it remember without breaking?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the number of lines is slightly dependent on like how much text is in the lines. So okay, that was the kind of cryptic answer, so I'll try to be much more literal. The actual constraint is when you pass like text to this text generation command in Cohere's API. There's a limit on the number of tokens, which are kind of like sub-word bits, and you can't exceed that limit. Practically speaking, the limit that tends to translate to in this library is that if you set the number of lines to sort of like 8 to 10, and the lines are sort of maybe a couple sentences at most, it seems to typically not break, because what will happen is you get sort of like a sweeping window, and it will just forget things that are too long ago in the conversation, and only keep that latest stuff. But if you set that window to be sort of too big, or if you like type a whole bunch of stuff at once, like more than a page long, then yeah, you could sort of break it that way. So yes, recapping, I would say the default. I think the default for most of these personas, it's actually in the config.json. Yeah, the max context example is 10, and that seems to work for most things we've tried. But of course, if you like adversarially add lots of text, you can definitely find ways that you would sort of have too much text there.
Okay, Eddie, your next question is, what is the biggest challenge while using it? How do we overcome it?
That's a good question. What is the biggest challenge? I think the biggest challenge is maybe the balance between doing a particular goal-oriented conversation really well versus being open-ended and completely flexible, right? Because I guess the guarantee you sort of have is that when the user types something, like the user's giving you a string, and then if you use this framework and use the underlying language model, you'll get back a string. It's some continuation of the conversation, which I know is kind of a trivial statement, but what it means is that if you want to have really high quality open-ended conversation, that is a kind of a goal you could go for. But to optimize for that at the same time as doing a really specific goal, I'm trying to think of an example here. So because I'm looking at the fantasy wizard, let's say your hackathon has something to do with like a fantasy game, like a medieval fantasy game, and you want a character that's like an NPC in a dungeon that tells you about the dungeon. Like that's a very, very specific goal. But if you wanted that character to also be good at answering like the current stock price of several real world companies, like those are two different goals that are very hard to balance and have it do well. So I would say that's probably the hardest thing to craft if you're doing something like this that's fairly prompt based, where you kind of give it this sort of like example set of a conversational track, I would say, along with this description.
Okay, awesome. How expensive would be one regular conversation with Cohere?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I would say if you're trying with low like rate / low concurrency, so if you're just testing for yourself to make sure it works and you use a trial key, then I guess the answer is like $0, because at 100, so I guess at the rate limit we have a trial keys. From what I've seen, it works fine to have like one user testing it out. So you can basically use it in like dev mode and or debugging mode, I suppose, and it should work fine. If you are actually using a prod key and then doing some number generation, oh man, I have to think about this and also double check that I'm not misremembering how our pricing structure works. Dang, that's a good question. I'll say this: I can't answer this off the top of my head because I would have to actually like look up our pricing structure and double check that. But I can tell you the method I've used to calculate it, which is that we're charging like per generation, and so you could get a sense of using the trial key. You could sort of like log how many generations you're doing in a few conversations, and then use that to pretty accurately estimate the cost that you would incur by doing this with a prod key, times the number of users or concurrency or something. So I think that would be a reasonable way to estimate ahead of time what your cost is going to be before like just committing to it.
One more question.
Yeah, another question. Does the token limit that you've mentioned include the persona?
Yeah, it does. So if I include the persona, you mean like the preamble and the example turns? Yeah, it includes all of that. What's happening behind the scenes? So I guess in the language of like the chatbot framework, we think of these like preamble and the example conversations as kind of semantically different. But if we're talking about token limits and passing this through a language model, it's a bunch of text that is the prompt, and then it's like the prompt plus the number of tokens you generate can't exceed the maximum. Actually, that maximum depends on which model you pick. So I won't say a static number because it's I think different for some choices. But yes, it is a short answer. It does include this preamble.
Okay, the last question is, I didn't get where you got those workshop demo files. So yeah, we'll share all the links after this presentation, after this workshop, so don't worry. Okay, and we have another question. Any advice if I wanted to add a new persona to Conversant, say a doctor, is there a way to force the model to say only ask questions?
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, to only ask questions. Okay, so there's two parts of this. To mostly ask questions, I think you could do this by like it seems kind of interesting, but prompt engineering is so weird. You could basically say in the preamble, like, this is a persona, like this persona or persona name, right? So for example, I could say this fantasy wizard only asks questions, and that will actually like affect the result. The other would be in these example turns to have it only ask questions, and I think that would give you a mostly desired result of mostly asking questions. To force it to ask questions, I can think of some really inefficient ways that are popping into mind right now. Like you could, reattempt until you get a question by checking like for a question mark at the end or something like that. That is both inefficient computationally and cost-wise. There's probably something better you could do, but honestly, it's hard for me to think of an example where you would strictly, truly only want questions. I would imagine that what you'd want is like a mostly inquisitive, like doctor, for example. Maybe you're doing some kind of like diagnostic thing. Although I will warn you that ungrounded, actually even grounded language models. So like language models in general, I would not trust them for like true medical diagnosis. That's an aside. But if you want an inquisitive model, you probably still want it to mostly ask questions, because if you disallow it to ever utter like a non-question, you might get some strange results where like if you ask it, "What's your name?" right, and it can only reply with questions, it's kind of like it might yield strange results.
Okay, here's the longer one.
Mhm.
How to teach model some knowledge, for example, 200 documents or 200 podcast transcripts, so the model can more or less accurately answer questions based on knowledge. Is it possible that model answer with link to raw information where it made answer from?
Okay, that's a really good question. So if I understand right, this is a question about like factually grounded conversation. So if I ask a question like, when was some company founded? Like there is a correct answer to that. So let me see here. There is partial support for this in the Conversant library, kind of, but but more robust support is coming up in an upcoming release. But if you dig around the GitHub versions, I think it'd just be hard to get working with the pip installable version. But if you were to fork the GitHub library, there's like a document data class and a searcher object, and the idea is that you can have some set of documents, you can embed them, and then do like a nearest neighbor search and sort of rephrase the bot's responses based on what it finds in a search. Realistically, you would need to write a bit more code to get that working. That is something we're looking into in an upcoming way, but I would say some good inspiration. If you want to try this in the scope of the hackathon, I would highly recommend looking at one of the other sandbox repos. So that first link I showed with the blog post, and we'll share that link later, has a number of different repositories that are open source, and one of them is like a question answering bot that does exactly this workflow of like you ask a question, it does a Google search, it gets the responses and embeds the content in them, and then does like a prompt injection. So it says like, okay, based on this context, answer the question. And the idea of doing that in a conversation is to kind of link those two things together, right? Like at some point in a conversation, you basically want to execute that whole workflow. So you can do it, but there's definitely some trickiness in actually the trickiness is basically in deciding like when should you ground and answer a question. It's not always obvious when it's a question or not. So there are many different approaches that you can do that.
Thank you. Another question. Does Cohere have any usage guidelines, like OpenAI GPT-3? Any restrictions on the kind of applications built on top of Cohere?
Yes, no, we do. I don't want to misquote them, so I won't try to do them by memory, but they're like definitely on our website somewhere. I think there's I mean, the usage restrictions are probably not that hard to guess. They're like the things you would expect. But yeah, it's on our website somewhere. I think in the sign up workflow, we mention like which things you can't use it for. Yeah.
Okay, next one is there a way to integrate this with metaverse/VR world 3D interactions? For example, HTML from glitch.com/3D integration to spatial XR.
I'm gonna go with maybe, and let me try to give a speculative answer. So I don't think I'm familiar with all the examples that are mentioned, but okay, I mean, I'll say it this way. With this library, like, although the Streamlit I showed was like some, it's like some web app as the front end, in principle, the front end could be anything because what the library lets you do is let you define some sort of bot's personality and kind of a conversational example track. And then as long as you pass it strings that you might have captured from a user in some form, the reply will call an underlying language model and then give you back a string that you could, again, like render in some form. So if I had to think of like a VR example or a metaverse example, or even just like a game example, you could do like, you have to chain together a lot of things, right? But you could do like speech to text from the user to get the text, then call reply with whatever you captured there, then get the model's reply from the underlying Cohere language model, then do like text to speech, and then like have the character say that. I would expect the challenge there would be like latency. So at least for the Cohere end of things, one way you can control latency would be to pick a smaller model. So in the config.json, set to x large, you could pick the smaller things and they'll be faster. They might be worse, so like contextually they might be not as coherent, I suppose, or they might not make as much sense. But that could be one way to do that. But yes, in a nutshell, the interface through which these replies are exposed or through which the user's utterances are captured, it's agnostic to that. So as long as it's something you can plug Python into, then it should work.
Is Python library equivalent for Node.js library?
Yeah, okay, so okay, that's a good point. So although Cohere has an SDK for many different like languages and frameworks, Conversant right now it's only a Python library. So this is a good point. So yeah, so if you want to use Conversant, it actually is only existing in a Python form. That's good feedback. Maybe we should consider other languages.
Okay, GPT-3 can Google information if it does not know it. Can Cohere do it? GPT-3 can also use Python packages to solve math. Can Cohere do it?
Yeah, those are the questions. So in these language models that we're using, they are pure like text-to-text models. I guess you can generate some code, but it's like pretty inconsistent. It's not meant. So for example, the model that we're calling under here, the Cohere X large model, it's not meant as a code generation model. So you might serendipitously have like a chatbot that generates some code, but I would not count on that. And then for executing like API searches based on what you pass it, these models don't do that.
Okay, thank you very much. These are all the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie, for taking your time and explaining and also answering our questions. So now that's all we have for today, and we'll see you all tomorrow. I wish you all the best and enjoy and make the most out of it. So thank you very much and goodbye.